even though they might receive similar exposure, they are still very differently impacted. So we see that the red bar shows low human development countries, and the blue bar shows high human development countries. And we see that even though the high human development countries are more exposed per year to hazards, they're much less impacted by hazards. So there's really a case in reducing the risk and ensuring that also the environment is in a healthy state. Next one, please. But then, which other factors create vulnerability? Well, we have unsustainable development processes, for example, unplanned urbanization, but also environmental degradation, the loss of natural buffers, and industrial accidents. Then there are structures exposed to disaster risks, for example, public infrastructure or housing, and then other critical facilities such as ministries, buildings, but also, of course, hospitals. And the institutional and financial framework and social setting is another factor that creates vulnerability. So we have to ensure that building codes are in place and insurances and finance for disaster mitigation. And finally, mechanisms to deal with the risk are another factor, such as preparedness planning, early warning systems, and risk information. Next one, please. So the goal of disaster risk reduction is really to reduce disaster losses, to enhance development, and to build resilience to hazards. Next one, please. But how do environmental conditions affect disaster risk? And there are, next one please, 5 connections. Natural hazards can be affected by social processes, but also degraded ecosystems reduce community resilience. On the other hand, healthy ecosystems will protect communities. But then disasters can create new environmental problems and new risks, and environmental degradation in itself is a hazard. Next one, please. Some examples of natural hazards that can be affected by social processes. Well, we have heard in length yesterday about climate change and how it is caused by greenhouse gas emissions, which alters climate patterns, but then there's also forest fires, and the magnitude of a forest fire depends very heavily on management of that forest. And also floods are dependent on erosion and sedimentation, well, prevention of erosion and sedimentation, but also deforestation and river diversion and drainage. Next one, please. But then again, climate change will multiply and really increase the hazards that we are already facing. So the IPCC report states that climate change will alter risk patterns in several ways. So the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events will increase. Then areas that have not experienced any hazards are now more exposed to hazards, and also it will increase the vulnerability of communities and to hazards. Next one, please. Then degraded ecosystems reduce community resilience. We know that the poor are the most vulnerable and also the least resilient to disasters. And we also know that environmental degradation is a major driver of poverty. Next one, please. This graph shows the relation between forest cover in a country and the proportion of people killed by tropical cyclones. And we see that in Haiti, where forest cover is very scarce, the highest rate of human deaths also occurred. Next one, please. Then there are different roles that ecosystems are taking in flood regulation. For example, we have in cultivated crop cover can provide flood protection, provided that it is well managed. On the other hand, drylands can protect land through vegetation cover, and also the aquifers can be recharged during a flood. Then forests will provide flood attenuation. In urban setting, people can move away from flood-prone areas. Again, wetlands will provide flood attenuation. And in coastal areas, if we have natural barriers and through beaches and mangroves, if they're not cut down. And in the polar ecosystem, polar discharge regulation to oceans in the Arctic. We have polar discharge regulation to oceans in the Arctic system. Next one, please. But disasters can also create new environmental problems and also new risks. So, for example, they can trigger the release of toxic substances into the environment. Often oil pipes are affected if there are some then damage to hazardous material production, and also damage to sewage treatment can occur, which then all create new risks and hazards. And next one, please. Disasters can also create new environmental problems and new risks, such as in a post-disaster recovery that can have immediate and long-lasting effects on the environment if we deplete natural resources, or the cumulative effects of any reconstruction. Then if EIA legislations, environmental impact legislation, are bypassed, or if we do not plan infrastructure, such as in the waste and the water sector, are bypassed, or if create new problems we do not plan finally, infrastructure, such as in the waste and the water sector, then environmental degradation in itself create new problems is a hazard. In addition to natural hazards, many communities face severe impacts from human-induced hazards, such as water scarcity and desertification, biodiversity loss, but also resource depletion, and you can see the list: disease and health, conflict, and technologies or industrial accidents. Now, next one, please. I'm not really going very deeply into the gender relation, because Cheryl Anderson will speak more about that. But again, we have heard yesterday many times that genders are differently affected by disasters due to their social roles and the status of men and women. So they are also impacted differently by hazards, and they experience environmental degradation in different ways, but also perceive risks differently. Next one, please. So there is again just a number of examples. Like there's evidence that women and children are 14 times more likely to die than men during disasters. But also during the Asian tsunami, we've heard it before, more women were killed than men. But also the death rate of women was almost 5 times as high for women than for men during the floods following the cyclone in Bangladesh in 1991.